do you think, would you, as a non-interventionist yourself, we haven't had a non-interventionist president since Calvin Coolidge, 30s, whatever you want to call it, right? Would you call President Trump the first non-interventionist president since Calvin Coolidge?
I would have. One of the things that attracted me to Donald Trump, and really I have been close to him. I know him well. I've known him for over a decade. He helped support my mission trip to Guatemala and to Haiti. He gave money so I could go down there. But he ran on a much different policy. I never really liked the Bush wing of the party. The Bush wing of the party believed that they were going to spread freedom everywhere at the point of a gun, and by golly, we'll make these people like freedom whether they like it or not. And it just doesn't work. I mean, people can get freedom, and it's even probably true in Venezuela. The people who want freedom are going to have to get it even now. They still haven't got. They still have the socialist authoritarian regime still in place. They have to get their own freedom. They have to fight for their own freedom ultimately. But I think that the philosophy of Trump was much different. Philosophy was for less...
First term or what he campaigned on for 24?
Even when he campaigned for this last time, he probably mentioned 30 times on the trail how much he was against regime change. But the people around him have very much had some influence. Lindsey Graham has a disproportionate amount of influence. He's around him a lot. And so does Marco Rubio. And they both are believers in regime change.
The Lindsey Graham relationship is tricky. It's kind of a... It doesn't make sense fully. Rubio does. The Lindsey Graham one is a little bit confusing. But would you consider him? Because remember when he was getting elected the first time around, do you want him to have access to the button because World War III and, it's supposed he's going to start wars with everybody. Boom. Comes in, ISIS, all this stuff, calm, relax, and then the protests start. Then COVID, we have to use it against them. Then Biden comes in. Then you got Russia, Ukraine, October 7th. Then he comes in, lowering the temperature. He said he stopped 8.5 wars. I don't know what he said, 8 or 8.5 wars, the way he says it. Would you put him down as a non-interventionist?
No, but I would say that his instincts are more aligned with mine than any other Republican has been in my lifetime, really. So I want to compliment that. I don't want to disparage that. Is he exactly where I am as far as a philosophy of non-intervention? My philosophy really would be we go to war out of defense. When we're being attacked. I don't really believe in offensive war. As much as I want freedom for Venezuela, as much as I want freedom for Iran, I don't really want to get involved with wars over there unless we were attacked. Neither one of them are a threat to our national security or in our national interest. But Trump has been less, I think, more open to the idea, well, the Western Hemisphere is different. These things, this is the new Donald's
Monroe Doctrine, Monroe Doctrine
version of the Monroe Doctrine. Oh, I don't know. I think that the ideas of non-intervention really apply no matter where you're thinking about in the world. They might apply less so if it's, there's an army along the border of Mexico thinking about invading. I think our border is much more important, but there's nothing about Venezuela. And in fact, many of the things that were argued about Venezuela, frankly, weren't true. I was on a program not too long ago and the broadcaster said to me, oh yeah, but at least we've stopped the fentanyl. And I was like, well, there's no fentanyl ever came. Yeah. And even the cocaine, most of it's going to Europe or to other islands on the way.
It's still some of it makes it here, though.
Probably some, but even the boats we've been blowing up. These are boats with 4 outboard motors. They probably go about 100 miles, and then they have to refuel. They're 2,000 miles from our coast. Most of these boats aren't coming to America, and we always have stopped them in the past. We have always interdicted, and we still actually do, interdict boats even all the way down off Venezuela. But when we stop them, about 1 in 4 don't have any drugs on them. We've stopped a boat that we were suspicious of.
So you're
didn't have any
saying
drugs.
It was more of a, leading, because they were building into I think Delta Force started working on this in August. So they've known for 4 months that they're going to attack to get Maduro. So you're saying this is all optics?
Yeah, it's a ruse in a way. The whole idea that he's being, it's a drug bust. That way it's not a war, so we don't have to tell Congress. So drug bust we can do anytime we want, anywhere we want. We're justified.
What do you think thought about that strategy?
Well, it's an elaborate strategy. I mean, they spent months blowing up these boats, not because they really thought they were going to do anything.
Who do you think came up with that idea?
Who do I think came up with it? I'm not positive exactly who came up with it.
If you were to speculate, would it be a Rubio? Would it be a Lindsey? I don't know.
I don't know specifically who came up with the boat strategy. I guess what I can tell you is that I'm disappointed that almost nobody else in my caucus pointed out the fact or is concerned with, are these people armed in the boats? If this is a war, typically you shoot people who are armed. Occasionally people who aren't armed get killed, but usually when you're trying to kill people who are armed, they say, oh, they're attacking us. It's the war on drugs. Their weapon is the drugs. And I say, well, not unless they're going to hit you on the head with a package of cocaine. I mean, selling drugs isn't a war. It's a terrible thing. People ought to be, told how, the scourge of what happens being addicted. But you're not being attacked with these drugs. You're making a foolish decision to buy their drugs and to use them. But think about this boat. Think about the boat. It gets to Miami, if it ever could get to Miami. It offloads it into a U-Haul truck. Now they're going up I-95. Do we take out a grenade launcher and blow up the truck? Well, nobody would be for that. Well, why would we be for that on the open seas? We have always had rules on the open seas that actually mirror ours. Not exactly the same, but the rules of the Coast Guard engagement are bullhorn, halt. We are going to board you to search you. We suspect you of having drugs. If they stop, they're boarded and it proceeds. If they don't stop, they can try to disable the boat with shots. And that's what they usually do. Then they either stop or it escalates. If they shoot back at you, then you can kill them. And that escalation of force is what we've always had. And mainly because if you're out there fishing and it looks like you're in the similar boat, but you are fishing, then you say, well, come aboard. There's no drugs. You don't get killed. Here, we're not taking any of those steps. And the Coast Guard statistics say about 1 in 4 times they're wrong. But I think the callousness on the part really of a lot of my colleagues on my side is like, oh, we don't care. They're drug dealers. Well, that's an allegation. That's why we don't blow up a truck. When we do, let's say we go into someone's house in D.C., we have a warrant, we do all the appropriate things. Sometimes a number gets transposed and we're at the wrong house. That's why we don't take a grenade launcher and just blow up the drug house. We actually, and it's hard work, but the policeman actually has to knock on the door and go into the house because sometimes we get the wrong house. And we've had tragedies in our country getting the wrong house. But you can't just blow people up and say that is in any way just or justice.
Yeah, the community that's the happiest is Venezuelans. Venezuelans celebrating that he's no longer there. Even some of the TV folks who cannot stand the president coming out and saying, "Look, you guys know I don't like him. You guys know I don't like what he stands for. But this is a celebration for our community, et cetera, et cetera." To me, I get the Monroe-Downroe doctrine to take care of the Western Hemisphere and make sure we're safe. But maybe let me ask the one question that's separate. Why do you think, because I think the reason why I think you're a very necessary voice is, if everybody agreed, even from the conservative side, and within the conservative side there aren't debates, then we have certain blind spots. And you're always the guy that kind of comes in and says, what's he saying? Oh, okay, good point. What's he saying? Oh, okay, we should consider that. Why do you think non-interventionist presidents don't get elected? Why do you think presidents that get elected are typically the ones that are interventionists if somebody crosses the line with us?
I think that's a really good question because I think people, and this is a generalization about the public, but I think they want things to be done. They want somebody to do something. So in some ways, Trump does something. He's been aggressive. So was President Obama, frankly, in using the executive order. He's impatient now that Congress won't do things. They want to get rid of the filibuster. They want to make it easier to do. And I guess from the non-interventionist point, what you're advocating for is sort of peace and prosperity, and people like that. But they also want a doer, and they're convinced that someone is evil. We must do something about this. It's the same with the economy. If you look at our wealth and our prosperity over the last 200 years worldwide, but particularly in the U.S., it is just beyond belief. And yet people can't come to grips with this. I've been on a speaking tour to colleges, and I start out with asking them, is it the best of times or the worst of times? The Tale of Two Cities, Charles Dickens, is it an age of wisdom or an age of foolishness?
What do you hear?
Mixed, but mostly Democrats are very, very pessimistic. If they're Democrats, if they're Republicans, they're mixed. But really, nobody is as joyful or elated as they should be. The statistics, there's a group called humanprogress.org out of Cato, and they look at this kind of stuff. In 1820, at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, 98% of people lived in abject poverty. This is defined as less than $2 a day. And they do this in constant dollars and they measure it. So when I was married in 1990, it had gone from 98% in absolute poverty to 33%. Just an amazing thing. But from when I was married in 1990 to today, it's less than 10%.
Wow.
Less than 10% of the world lives on $2 a day. The miracle of the Industrial Revolution, the miracle of technology is just beyond belief. How many hours it takes you to like buy a refrigerator? The average workman worked like 160 hours to buy a refrigerator in the 1950s when it was supposedly so good. They work like 10 hours or something to buy a refrigerator or less now. Electricity, originally the candlestick makers hated Edison and they worried so much, and all the candlestick makers went out of business, and they did all go out of business. But it used to cost, I think it was 1,000 working hours to have enough electricity to read at night for a year. Now it's 10 seconds of the average man's working to have a light bulb for a whole year.
This gives me the vibes of future looks bright. This gives me optimism.
Yeah,
This
there
gives
is.
me
There's
excitement.
incredible optimism, but there's whole books written on this. Steven Pinker's written a book on this, Marion Tupy, that people just can't handle good news. They want to hear bad news because, and some people say we were evolved that way. So let's say our village is doing very well, but one day out of the year the lion comes. We talk about the lion every day after that. Lion eats one of our kids, eats one of our wives. And so we're very fearful of the bad news, but we're not really willing to incorporate the good news so much.
It's interesting. On going back to the question, why don't non-interventionists become presidents, right? Pat Buchanan was one of the favorites. A lot of people talk about William Jennings. I think William Jennings Bryan back in the days, he campaigned, Christian guy, good guy. I think he was a Democrat, but he campaigned on running for office. He ran 3 times, failed. In my company, like this week, something happened. And it's funny because even in my insurance company now, we would have somebody that would do a compliance thing or somebody would do something to us. And we'd sit there and we say, how do we react to this? Do we sue? Do we not sue? And to me, the non-interventionist executive will always say what? Why would we sue? It's just noise. No need to do it. Then the other guy's going to be like, if the market believes they can keep doing this to us, we have to sue. Let's make it public, right? So this is Rand Paul, and this is going to be, somebody else that's...
I think there is that. And just on the lawsuit thing, I always loved the Wall Street, the Walmart approach. Walmart takes everybody. You steal from Walmart, you take something off the shelf, everybody's prosecuted.
What do you think about that?
They fight everything, and what they do is they deter lawsuits. And in some ways, in business, it is good. If people are going to rip you off, you have to push back on it. But going back to the non-interventionism and what sells and doesn't sell. The bigger, broader part of it, not just with foreign policy, is the idea of the message of, let's say I'm a Democrat, and what do Democrats offer you for an election? They'll give you free car, free education. They'll give me some of your money. If you make more money than me, we'll take some of your money and give it to me. If you have 3 cars, they'll give me one of your cars, that kind of stuff. So they're big on giving you material things. Their message is pretty easy to sell. I mean, if you're working stiff and you don't have that much money, and I say I'll give you a free car, well, damn. All right, chicken in every pot, the Huey Long, chicken in every pot. But then along comes the other side. And the other side is somewhat non-interventionist in the economy as well as overseas.
Sure.
So we're the libertarians, the free market. And what do I offer you? I say, look, the system of capitalism, of freedom of exchange, where I don't tell you what you can charge or what you can make and what you can sell, has created more prosperity than any other economic system in the world. Has created phenomenal prosperity. And I can show you over the last 200 years what's happened in America, and people are dying to get into America. Which is going to sell, which is easier to sell. I think mine is a harder sell because I'm not offering you something. So inherently, the ideas of freedom, liberty, and limited government, less intervention in the marketplace, your personal life, or even if it's your personal life, I say, well, I don't think we ought to regulate what your kids can do on the internet. You regulate what your kids do on the internet. And people, oh, no, we need to intervene. And it's like, so one of the laws they passed, and I opposed this, was we're going to tell your kid that he's 13, he cannot see gambling ads or beer on Hulu or some streaming service. And I said, well, when you turn on the broadcast TV and you watch golf, they're sponsored by FanDuel and all these companies.
Right.
That's all you see is gambling. And if you watch the Super Bowl on broadcast TV, all you see is beer. But you're going to regulate the internet, and a 13-year-old is going to have to say, I'm 13, and then we're going to turn off the beer commercials and the gambling commercials. Like,
Give me a break. Right. So there is an interventionist in Rand Paul. That's interesting. When we set out to create a shoe that blends comfort, function, and luxury, we had the choice to make it fast. We had the choice to make it cheap. We chose neither. Instead, we chose Tuscan Italy. We chose true Italian craftsmanship, each pair touched by 50 skilled hands. We chose patience, spending 2 years perfecting every detail, and we chose the finest quality at every step. Introducing the Future Looks Bright collection. Not rushed, not disposable, not ordinary. Rather, intentional, luxurious, timeless. If you enjoyed this video, you want to watch more videos like this, click here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click here.